All right. Well, thank you to everyone joining us here on Zoom and on Facebook. And we are really excited to have Erin Paré here with us. Erin is a Army spouse, and I understand you had a career here. I'm in DC, so you had a DC life at one time and wisely moved on.
That's right.
And now you and your husband are small business owners in North Carolina, and you recently ran and won a seat in the North Carolina, it's General Assembly, correct?
Right.
Okay. Yeah. So would love to, I don't like reading long, long-winded introductions. I think it's so much more interesting to hear from you. And so would love to hear a little bit of your background and what led you to decide to step up and lead.
Well, very good. Well, thank you for having me today. I really appreciate this opportunity, particularly to talk to some fellow military spouses, some of my best friends and people who that I've been through sort of thick and thin with for over many years. So I really appreciate being here. So just a little bit of background on me is I'm originally from the Northern Virginia area. So I went to college at George Mason University, got my graduate degree in Arlington at the Arlington campus up there in international commerce and policy. And then from there, I worked in public policy in Washington. So I worked primarily on regulatory reform, advocating for the principles of sound science, transparency, cost benefit analysis, in how we look at the way regulations are made and on the federal level. So that was valuable experience to me. And this is kind of being on the other side of it now that I'm an elected official. So I'm happy for that sort of background, but I'm also very proud of my background as a military spouse. So as part of that experience, I met my husband when I was working in Washington, and he was part of the 82nd Airborne here at Fort Bragg at the time. So we got married, and as many military spouses do, I put my career on the back burner and became his kind of everything at the time during the war. This is back during the war, and he was a ranger. He was eventually a ranger when we were married. So we packed everything up and we moved down to Savannah, Georgia, where he was an officer in the Ranger unit down there, 1st Battalion, 75th Ranger Regiment. And by virtue of his position, I became very actively involved in family readiness groups, which were particularly busy back when it was wartime. And so I led a group of 120 families in our headquarters company. And when they deployed a lot. So Wayne deployed about 8 times, I think, to Iraq and Afghanistan during the war. And so I held down the fort, so to speak, down here back home when they were overseas. So 12 years of that, kind of traveling all over the place. And we ended up, when retirement was coming up, we decided to settle down in the area sort of where we began in North Carolina. And we wanted to open a small business, set roots in a community. So many people may be watching this as a military spouse or military family with children. You may know that, when you ask your kids, somebody asks your children, where are you from? They don't really necessarily know how to answer that question. So then we really wanted to be part of a community for the long haul. And we had the opportunity to do that. And we really wanted to open a small business, and it's a small family business that would grow and be something that we contribute to the community for many, many years. So we did. We opened a little small business. It's called Play It Again Sports. It's a franchise. Many of you might know what that is. And it's been a lot of fun, quite an adventure, but it's been great for us. And so now I ran for office, and I'm now a representative in Southern Wake County here in North Carolina in District 37 in the General Assembly. And we start tomorrow, and I'm really looking forward to making some progress on some key issues.
Yeah, well, I think that's a story that so many of us can relate to, not the running part, but the moving around and trying to figure out your own career as you are supporting your service member. I think we all love that our spouses have this heart for service, but so many of us want to serve in our own way as well. And so I think a lot of folks can relate to the challenge that you described there. So thank you for joining us before you guys kick off. I know it's a busy time as you get ready to go into session tomorrow. Can you talk a little bit about your thought process, what led you to run, and how you thought about your military spouse or military family background as you were deciding to run? Did that weigh in? Was that a pro? Was that a con? How did you make that decision?
Well, I think that, military spouses have unique experience. Many of them move a lot. So you have to be sort of resourceful. You have to be able to adapt, and you have to be able to not necessarily make friends, but connect with people quickly. So I think in our case, we were about 5 or 6 duty stations, and there was always an opportunity in every community in which we lived to make a difference, to fill a role, to step up in some way to improve the community that we were in, whether it would be for the kids, other military families, the troops, the mission, generally speaking. So I think as a military spouse, you have a unique experience of being able to work with sort of a wide variety of people. A unit, at least in my experience, or I guess even a unit of spouses, it's sort of a smaller example, like a sample of a bigger population of people, because people have different experiences. They come from different places, and they find themselves all in one unit together. So I think a military spouse has a unique opportunity and background to make a difference, to work with people with different backgrounds. And I think a lot of military spouses have a servant's heart. So for me, that sort of wanting to serve my community was just a part of who I was, probably in part because of my experience as a military spouse. So when we ended up settling down and we were, out of the military, had our company and our little business, I really wanted to try to make a difference in the community. And I think that was a good way for me to get, and I guess I didn't really realize it was happening at the time, but once you start getting involved in the schools, volunteering in the classroom, becoming a member of your Rotary, starting a nonprofit that benefits a portion of your community, serving on a town board, those are things that I did. And because of that, I was able to kind of have this finger on the pulse of what was going on in Southern Wake County. I knew a lot of the people that were also doing what I was doing, and you can kind of see where improvements needed to be made. You could hear from other community members the issues that were important to them and what wasn't getting done, what needed to get done, and why. And so I think that was a very meaningful precursor into saying, you know what, I can make this difference. And I want to make this difference. And to do that, I'm going to run for office. And so that's what that was my experience that led me to this new adventure that I'm in now, is that desire to make a difference and knowing the difference that needed to be made and making my case to voters. And so it did work out in November, and I'm happy to be here.
We're happy that you're there too.
Thank you.
And can you talk a little bit, I know because I stalked your campaign online, but can you talk a little bit about how you talked about being a military spouse and a military family when you were campaigning? Because we have a lot of folks who who attend Homefront Rising and our events and wonder sometimes, should I even be talking about the fact that I'm a military spouse? People are going to think I'm a carpetbagger, or I don't have ties to the community, or I think there's a lot of concern sometimes about bringing that up. I see it like you, I think, as a strength. But so can you talk about that a little bit, about how you spoke about that when you were campaigning?
Sure. I think that, a couple things. I think when I was campaigning, I was very open about what I'm all about. This is what I stand for. This is my background. This is how I spent the last 20 years of my life. And this is why and what I did. But I would not, as a military spouse, be afraid of that experience. I think it's great experience. And I think it's honorable. It's service. I look at it as service. Even if you're not the service member, you were supporting the mission in a profound way. And you helped other military spouses, at least many of the military spouses, almost all of them, in a way that you might think is small, but it made a tremendous difference, especially when, in our case, during deployments, the mission benefited because military spouses were willing to make that sacrifice and take on that job back home. The soldier could do a better job overseas. And I think that you can't overstate the value of that type of work and that service to not only the unit, but to the country. And so I think when I talk about it to voters, it was a familiar story and perspective. We have a good, solid military community here in Southern Lake. So maybe that is my experience in my race. But I do think that there's a lot of women, a lot of spouses, men and women, that have a similar experience, even going back generations. Even if it wasn't them, they heard about the sacrifice of military spouse, the work of military spouse, or just the troops and the impact of war on the family. And I think they could relate based on those experiences they were either heard or passed down to them from other people and generations in their family, or that they experienced themselves or their parents did. So I think it was a very relatable message. And I think that there's a lot to be proud of there from the military spouse standpoint. At least I'm very proud of that experience that I've had.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we should be talking about it. You know, you kind of touched on it a little bit, but we do live in a lot of different parts of the country, and you get to see what works and what doesn't work when it comes to school and social services and trash pickup and all kinds of government services. And I think that is a real strength to be able to say, yes, maybe I've moved around. This is where I have chosen to be. This is my chosen community now. And I have this great experience from these other places where I thought this was great and this was not so great. And so I absolutely think it's a strength. People tell it as that.
Yeah, I kind of touched on something interesting. Like, you have seen so much. It's almost day-to-day things sometimes that you've seen it work differently in the different places that you have lived, that you have that perspective of, they did this in this community and this was the result of it that I was part of. I'm going to take that worked over there and implement it to where I am now, and to improve life for the people in that community or the families or the kids in that community. And that is a unique experience that I think not a lot of people have, that a military spouse has. So I think you're exactly right.
Yeah, good. I'm going to tell everybody you said I was I'm accurate on that point. How long was it after you settled in North Carolina before you decided to run? Was it a significant period? I mean, you talked about getting involved with, I think you said city council and that kind of thing. So it sounds like it was at least several years before you decided to actually make a run.
Right. We've lived here about 6.5 years now. Yeah, where I am. So it was, I mean, it doesn't seem like that long, I guess, because time seems to fly. My kids are now in middle school, which I can't believe. I mean, when Cole he's almost in middle school, but when we got here, he was in preschool. It's just crazy how time flies. But it's been an eventful 6.5 years, and it's been a valuable time to really to see how life works, and outside of the military. It was actually a little bit of a transition, to be honest with you. I mean, spending so much time on living on post, moving to a different post, and packing everything up. There would be times where we would move into temporary housing, and we had this room full of boxes we didn't even bother to open because we knew we would be packing up and leaving again. So unpacking everything when we moved here is like, wow, I don't remember having this glass pitcher. This is great. I got this at the wedding. I don't remember this. It was kind of nice to finally be able to just unpack your life after so many years of not really being able to do that, always preparing for the next move 2 or so years down the road. But so it was a little bit of a different experience, but but each experience was wonderful and great in its own way, and I think it has prepared me, and I think a lot of other spouses would agree, prepare you for the next challenge in life. I mean, so I think the military spouse, generally speaking, is pretty tough, and they're smart, and they're willing to give of themselves in a way that benefits the greater good, and I think that's a maybe they're unsung heroes in a way, I think, in that sense. But I think that's true for so many of us, maybe all of us, but so many of us, I think that's true about us. And I think we should be proud of that.
Well, I know I and probably quite a few others on the call look forward to joining you on the other side of service and unpacking all those boxes that were just slugging around with us right now. So one question that I always ask is, what, especially on the campaign trail, what did you find to be the most rewarding part of campaigning, or the part that you enjoyed the most? And what was the most challenging, or the part that you just never ever want to do ever again?
Well, there was a lot of both of those, I think. I think every race is, well, not every race is different, but I think there are different types of races depending on what you're running for and how close it is. And I think in my case in Southern Wayne County, it was a very emotional race for both sides, and for a lot of people, not just because of the overall environment that we're in. It was an emotional election, I think, for even from the top down. I think it was. So it was hard, and it was a lot of work, and I think it's a little daunting maybe for some folks to put yourself out there, put yourself out there and open yourself up to criticism, to attacks. In my case, there was a lot of them. I think that, my family took some of that from a lot of people, and we had to fight. We had to fight to win. And, but when you really believe in what you're fighting for, I think it makes it so worth it. Almost, you want to be successful because you want to improve the state of things, and you want to make some good change. But being out there and really hearing back from voters about how appreciative they are that you're taking a stand on certain issues that really intimately impact them or their kids or their parents or their pocketbook, that is so important. And just it gives you a little bit more energy. I'm doing something worthwhile. I'm doing it. I'm almost there, and I'm really fighting for these people who haven't had their voice heard, and that makes it all worth it. So maybe that's me because I used to work in public policy and I worked in some campaigns, so I kind of know how it can get, and I was prepared for that. And maybe I'm just kind of a tougher person, having been a military spouse. but I think that is a lot. It's daunting for a lot of people to really put yourself out there to criticism, and there's plenty of it. But I think it's worthwhile because you're doing something important that's going to change lives. And I do believe that what we're doing here in this position in the state of North Carolina, on a lot of issues like education, the economy, public safety, transportation, healthcare, all of those are critically important issues that are going to change lives, hopefully for the better. And I'm very proud to be in a position to be able to contribute to that. And I think you got to keep your eye on that ball and just go for it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And we need, I think now more than ever, good folks to step up and run. And it can be scary, and it makes me sad to think that really good folks might be deterred because of having to put yourself out there. So it's good to hear that, that ultimately, when it's something that you believe in and believe strongly in, that it is worth it to do that.
Right.
So I hope many other military spouses will be following in your footsteps.
I hope so too.
Well, I am going to open it to see if we have questions here since we're getting close to 1:30. So folks on the line, let's see. Oh, I do have a question. So I see on Erin's website that her status as a military spouse isn't especially highlighted. How did she see her background as a military spouse, either useful or harmful? Or did it make sense not to stress it? So we kind of talked about that a little bit, but do you want to speak to that again about how you utilize your spouse status as a candidate?
Sure, I think so. Well, I think in some ways, I think, I'm a patriotic person, a very patriotic person. So, I'm very proud of my military spouse experience. And I think that that carried over into the issues. And I think when it comes to helping military spouses be able to compete for jobs, I know a lot of them that put their careers on the back burner and to support the mission over many, many years. And some spouses are, signed in locations where they can't do the job that they were trained to do. So we think of some jobs, some careers that can transfer easily from one location to the next, such as the healthcare industry, maybe education. But a lot of us, and I never was able to do this, even though I would have loved to, be assigned to overseas, to go serve, in another country, especially that situation, but also just sometimes there's small towns, sometimes you're in the mountains, somewhere where there's really not the ability to work. So I think that when we talked about the issues and relocation, the military spouse is a great person to talk to about that. So I talked about that experience a whole lot on the campaign trail, and I was asked about it a lot too. So by all parties, all kinds of voters were interested in that experience. So I think that also had a connection with education. I mean, as those of us who have children that have been educated in a military school on post, sometimes that if you're on post schooling somewhere and your child is receiving a certain curriculum, or they get Spanish every 3 days or something like that, and then you move to somewhere completely different and there is not on post schooling, and they are assigned to the district right where you're living, either it's off post or on post, that can be a challenge sometimes. And so that does connect with education policy and those opportunities that are available for families for their kids to take advantage of. So I think just, that's another perspective, looking at, whether you're essential personnel and you have to live on post, or if you don't have to live on post, you live off post, and then you send your kids to district schools there. And is that really what you're looking for? Or do you have to then send your kids to a private school? Education and those changes for military families it's very important. And I think it's on the minds of a lot of parents, a lot of mothers who are military spouses. How do we keep that continuity in education for the kids? And I think that directly relates to some education reform that was part of the campaign that I talked about, like school choice, not just making sure that our public schools are well funded and strong, but also making sure that those opportunities for those choices that best fits the kids was available to the families who needed it. And I think that experience as a military spouse, having seen on post schooling or just some challenges from frequently moving for kids and transferring that education was an important topic to talk about in the campaign. And I was asked a whole lot about that. So yeah, it's another example of how that military spouse experience, raising a family as an active duty military spouse, really did apply to people who didn't have that experience. So that was valuable.
Yeah, I think, like we were touching on earlier, there's so many things that military families experience: childcare, like you're saying, education, finding a job. And most Americans deal with the same things. We just deal with them over and over again in different places. And so it's heightened for us, I think. But we can relate those, and you have to when you're campaigning. You can talk about your experience as a military family, but then you have to be able to relate that back to your future constituents. But I think we can, because the things that we experience, although some parts of it are unique because of that mobility piece, a lot of it is the same stuff that everybody is experiencing. They just, once they find childcare, maybe they don't have to keep finding it over and over again. Uh, but yeah, and I think you came across our radar because you were talking about being a military spouse. So I think that's how we happened to stumble across your campaign. So
Right.
I think you were being loud and proud about it, which we love to see.
Oh yeah, yeah. Yes. We had during the campaign, we had a website, and I had my bio on there, and I talked a lot about our units that we were in, and we might be under a transition right now with the website. I'm not quite sure. I have to look and see where we are with that. So maybe that's what the participant is talking about. But yes, it was a big portion of my campaign to talk about that experience and relate that to what the families were going through that I'm representing now.
We have one more question, which hopefully we can squeeze in here quickly, and then we'll let you go because I know you're busy. You mentioned experiencing criticism on the campaign. How did you prepare your family for that? So did you guys sit down and talk about that beforehand when you decided to run, or did you kind of deal with it as it came along?
Well, my kids, I felt like were old enough that I could give them a little bit of a heads up. Um, and at the time, I didn't really know what we were going to get into. I mean, I had a primary, a three-way primary, between two great people who were part of my own party. And I was lucky enough, I feel like they made me a better candidate through that whole process, because it was tough going up against them. They were top-notch competitors. And but in a primary, you're competing against people who are running in your own party. So you tend to agree on a lot of the issues. When I advanced from that, then it was going to get, with the general election, I knew that it was going to get contentious, or had the potential to. So my daughter Madison is 13, and my son is 10. His name's Cole. And we did sit down one night for dinner, like we normally do, and we were just talking about the campaign, and I just kind of said, there's going to be some people that might not say some very nice things about your mom, but I know that, and I'm tough, and I can handle that. So if you do hear that, just know that that's just someone expressing their opinion. But mommy does feel strongly about some values that I know that we share as a family, and some people don't share the same values. And I just kind of told them that I'm open to hearing what everybody has to say and considering their point of view, which I am, and I think I'm a better leader or representative for that. But I knew that in a high emotional race, which it had the potential to be, that there could be some really nasty comments. And to be honest with you, because we were virtual schooling because of COVID with the kids, I don't think maybe it would never have been a problem, but I think that probably that protected them a little bit. They weren't in school so much to maybe hear some feedback. There was only one comment toward my son that I thought was really pretty low, that I wasn't happy with, but we just kind of protected him from it. And we just got to move on and just stand up for what you believe in, and have a servant's heart, and want to do the best for the people, and kind of let that stuff, take it with a grain of salt, and just know what you're there doing. But that's life. It's a life lesson. It happens not just in politics, but in every other corner of life. And it's not fun, but I think you just have to deal with it. It's just part of it. And it's probably a good lesson for my kids to see me, go through that and come out the other side, and endure whatever we had to. But I think that right now it's just about everybody. It's not about parties or the race or the competition anymore. It's really about doing what's right for the people in North Carolina and Southern Wake County, so we can get some policies that work for people, so their lives are better going forward. And that applies to Democrat, Republican, Libertarian, anybody, no matter who you look like, no matter how old you are, no matter how many kids you have, whether you have kids, anything. It applies to everyone. And that is why I'm here. It's to make progress and make life better, and make North Carolina better for the people here in our state, and particularly the people in Southern Wake County. And that's what I'm going to do.
Well, that's fantastic. And I mean, great advice that I hope we can all take to heart to let some of that just slide off your back.
Right.
Easier said than done, but very good advice. And I'm sure your kids are super proud. And I know the Homefront Rising community is very proud to have a strong military spouse leader like yourself. So I'm going to do two plugs really quickly and then we'll wrap up. One is for the Military Spouses Guide to Running for Office, which is newly published and on the Homefront Rising website. So we'll post the link to that on our Twitter and our Facebook page. So check that out and let us know what what you think, what else you want to see in the guide. We're constantly updating it, so let us know what's missing. And then the next Homefront Rising chat is next week with Amy Kroll, also a military spouse and the executive director of the LBJ Women's Campaign School at University of Texas. So if you're ready to follow in Erin's footsteps, either run a campaign or run yourself, this campaign school, the applications are open now for the next cohort, and we'll be talking with Amy about how you can get involved in that. So thank you so much, especially when things are so busy and you're getting ready for tomorrow. We really appreciate your time and you being willing to share your expertise with everyone. So thank you.
Well, you're welcome. Thank you for thinking of me and thank you for having me. I hope to be back sometime and good luck to everybody out there thinking of running. It is a lot of fun. It's very rewarding and I wish you the most success possible. If I can be helpful, please reach out to me.
We appreciate that. Have a great session.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.